There is something happening to you right now that you cannot see with your eyes, but some part of you already knows is real. Not because someone told you, not because you read it somewhere and decided to believe it, but because you have felt it. In those moments when a room changes the second you walk into it, in those moments when you know something is wrong before a single word is spoken, in those moments when you are standing near someone and something about their presence makes you want to either move closer or leave immediately, and you cannot explain why, not in any language the surface world has given you. You attributed those moments to intuition, to mood, to coincidence, to the mysterious machinery of human psychology that science hasn't quite figured out yet. But there is a layer beneath that explanation, and what is in that layer is not mystical in the way you might think. It is not vague. It is not metaphorical. It is measurable, structured, ancient, and right now, in this precise period of time, it is doing something it has not done in a very long time. Your aura is not decorating you. It is not a spiritual accessory. It is not something you develop by meditating long enough or thinking positive thoughts consistently enough. Your aura is a field, is a structured, layered, electromagnetically active field that surrounds and interpenetrates your physical body, that carries information your nervous system transmits before your conscious mind has processed a single thought, that ancient traditions spent thousands of years mapping with extraordinary precision, and that modern biophysics has now begun to measure in ways that should have rewritten every textbook about what a human being actually is. And right now something is happening to that field. Something specific. Something that the traditions that mapped it predicted, that the science that measures it is beginning to detect, and that you have been feeling in your body for longer than you have had words for it. This is not a transmission about believing in auras. This is a transmission about understanding what your aura actually is, what it is actually made of, what its layers actually do, and what the activation that is currently underway actually means for the way you move through the world, the way you relate to other people, and the way reality responds to you. We begin at the surface, because the surface is where most people stop, and the surface is not the truth. Most people who have heard the word aura have a surface-level picture of it, a glow around the body, a colored halo, something that psychics see and ordinary people don't. In the popular imagination, the aura is either a spiritual concept for people who believe in that sort of thing, or it is a new age fantasy with no grounding in anything real. Those are the two options the surface world offers you: belief or dismissal. But beneath that surface picture, there is a layer that changes everything about what you are looking at. The human body is not a closed system. This is not a spiritual claim. This is basic physics. Every biological process in your body generates an electromagnetic field. Your heart generates the most powerful of these. The electrical activity of your heart produces a field that extends several feet outside your body in every direction. This is not contested. This is measured. The instrument used to measure it is called a magnetocardiograph, and what it records is the electromagnetic signature of a field that does not stop at your skin. Your brain generates a field as well, measured by magnetoencephalography. Your neurons fire in patterns that produce electromagnetic oscillations, and those oscillations extend beyond the boundary of your skull. Every muscle in your body generates electrical activity when it contracts. Your gut, which contains more neurons than your spinal cord, generates its own electromagnetic patterns. Your body is not a thing that produces electricity as a side effect of being alive. Your body is an electromagnetic system that happens to have a physical form. The field produced by all of this activity, the composite electromagnetic envelope that surrounds your body, as a result of every biological process occurring simultaneously inside it, that is the physical substrate of what traditions have always called the aura. And here is something that the surface explanation tends to skip past, because it is inconvenient for the model of the human being as a closed biological machine. The electromagnetic field your body produces is not uniform. It is not a simple sphere of undifferentiated energy, radiating outward like heat from a stove. It is structured. It has patterns. Those patterns change in response to what is happening inside you, to your emotional state, to your physiological condition, to the quality of your attention, to the content of your thoughts. The field is dynamic. It is constantly updating. It is, in the most literal sense, a broadcast. And everything in your environment that has a nervous system capable of receiving electromagnetic signals is receiving it. This includes every other human being in your vicinity. Their nervous systems are reading your broadcast, and your nervous system is reading theirs. And this exchange is happening continuously, beneath the threshold of conscious awareness, in the space between people that the surface world calls empty, but that is, in electromagnetic terms, anything but. If this is landing for you, here is something I want to offer before we go further. Have you spent years trying every surface fix, therapy, mindset work, manifestation, habit redesign, and the same patterns keep coming back in different clothes? Every one of those tools is working on belief and behavior. The actual pattern was installed deeper than any of them can reach. Beneath the veil, a quantum map of reality's hidden layers walks through the full 5-layer descent, the surface reality you were handed, the layer where the pattern was actually installed, the physics underneath that, the ancient traditions that mapped the same thing thousands of years ago, and what you actually are at the bottom of all of it. This is the layer that therapy, mindset work, and manifestation could never reach. The longer you keep working the surface, the longer that deeper layer keeps generating the same life. So do this one tonight. It's waiting in the pinned comment below. Now back to the thread we were following. But here is where the surface explanation stops being enough. Because if the aura were simply a byproduct of biological electricity, it would be interesting but essentially passive. A glow with no function. And that is not what the research shows. And it is not what the traditions mapped. And it is not what you have been experiencing. The field is not just emitted, it is received. It is processed. It communicates. The HeartMath Institute, which has been studying the electromagnetic field of the human heart for decades, has documented something that should have made front-page news everywhere and somehow did not. When two people are in close proximity to each other, their heart fields interact. The electromagnetic field of one person's heart can be detected in the brainwave patterns of another person standing nearby. The field of your heart is literally being read by the nervous system of the person standing next to you, and their field is being read by yours, and this exchange of electromagnetic information is happening beneath the threshold of conscious awareness, beneath language, beneath the surface of what either person thinks is happening between them. That moment when you walk into a room and something shifts, that is not imagination. That is your electromagnetic field encountering the composite field of everyone in that space and processing information about what is happening in those fields faster than your conscious mind can translate it. What the HeartMath researchers also found, and this is the part that changes the entire framework, is that the quality of this exchange is not fixed. It is not simply a passive transfer of whatever signal happens to be present. The coherence of the field determines the quality of what is transmitted and what is received. A heart in a state of coherence, which HeartMath defines as the synchronized, ordered rhythmic pattern produced by positive emotional states, broadcasts a signal that is organized, clear, and measurable at greater distances than a heart in a state of incoherence. A heart broadcasting from a state of anxiety, resentment, or chronic stress broadcasts a chaotic, fragmented signal. The difference is not just in the emotional content. It is in the electromagnetic structure of the broadcast itself. This is the layer beneath the surface claim that emotions affect your energy field. They do not just affect it in some vague, unmeasurable way. They alter the precise electromagnetic architecture of what your body is broadcasting into the space around it, and that alteration changes how every other nervous system in your vicinity receives and processes your presence. But there is a layer beneath that. Because the electromagnetic field is the outermost, most physically measurable layer of what the aura actually is. It is the layer that instruments can currently detect. But it is not the only layer. And the traditions that mapped this field did not stop at the electromagnetic surface. They went deeper. And what they found beneath it is where this transmission begins to go somewhere the surface explanation cannot follow. If this transmission is reaching a layer in you that you have been waiting for someone to name, like this video and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Let us go back in time. Not to find mythology, to find cartography. Approximately 5,000 years ago, in the Vedic tradition of ancient India, scholars and practitioners developed a detailed map of the human energy field that they called the kosha system. The word kosha means sheath, and the map they drew described not one field around the body, but 5 distinct sheaths, each one subtler than the last, each one interpenetrating the physical body and extending beyond it, each one operating at a different level of density and carrying a different category of information. The outermost sheath in the Vedic map is called the Annamaya Kosha, the food body, the physical form, the densest layer, what you can touch and see. Beneath that, or rather, surrounding and interpenetrating it, is the Pranamaya Kosha, the energy body, the layer made of what the Vedic tradition called prana, the life force that animates the physical form. This is the layer that acupuncture works with, the layer that the Chinese tradition called qi, the layer that carries the energetic patterns that precede physical health or physical illness, the layer that is currently being studied by researchers measuring biophoton emission from living tissue, because living cells emit light, coherent light, in patterns that correlate with biological function and dysfunction, and that light does not stop at the skin. Beneath the pranamaya kosha is the manomaya kosha, the mental body, the layer of thought, emotion, and psychological pattern, the layer that carries the recurring structures of your mind, the loops you run, the beliefs you hold, the emotional signatures that color everything you perceive. This is not metaphor. The electromagnetic signature of your heart changes measurably depending on your emotional state, and those changes alter the field that your body broadcasts into the space around you. Your emotional patterns are literally encoded in the field you are emitting right now. Beneath that is the Vijnanamaya kosha, the wisdom body, the layer of discrimination, intuition, and deeper knowing, the layer that the Vedic map identified as the seat of what we might call higher intelligence. The part of you that knows things your thinking mind has not yet reasoned its way to. And at the innermost layer, surrounding and interpenetrating everything else, is the Anandamaya kosha, the bliss body, the layer the Vedic tradition described as closest to pure consciousness itself. The layer that is most difficult to perceive from the surface but is, paradoxically, the most fundamental. The layer that the others rest upon, 5 layers, 5 sheaths, each one subtler than the last, each one carrying different information, each one interpenetrating the physical body and extending beyond it. This is the map that was drawn 5,000 years ago, not as poetry, not as metaphor, not as spiritual aspiration, but as a precise description of the structure of the human energy field. What is remarkable about this map is not simply its age. What is remarkable is its specificity. The Vedic scholars who developed the kosha system were not offering a general spiritual framework. They were reporting the results of systematic inner investigation, conducted across generations, refined by practitioners who spent decades learning to perceive the subtler layers of their own field, with the same precision that a modern scientist brings to measuring a physical phenomenon. The kosha map is not a belief system. It is a research report written in the language of a tradition that had no word for what we now call physics, but was doing something structurally identical to what physics does. Observing a phenomenon repeatedly, refining the description, testing the description against experience, and passing the refined description forward to the next generation of investigators. And the map they passed forward has a structural correspondence to what modern biophysics is beginning to find beneath the surface of matter itself that is too precise to be coincidence. Now here is what modern biophysics is beginning to find beneath the surface of matter itself. In the 1970s, a German biophysicist named Fritz Albert Popp made a discovery that should have permanently changed the way biology understands living systems. While studying the light-absorbing properties of chemical carcinogens, Popp noticed something unexpected. Carcinogenic molecules all shared a specific property. They absorbed ultraviolet light and re-emitted it at a different frequency. But more than that, he began to detect that living cells themselves were emitting light, not reflected light. not light from external sources, light generated from within the cells themselves. He called this biophoton emission, and what he found when he studied it more deeply was extraordinary. The light being emitted by living cells was not random, it was coherent. In physics, coherent light is light in which the waves are synchronized, moving in phase with each other. Lasers produce coherent light. Random light sources do not. The fact that living cells were emitting coherent light meant that there was some organizing principle within the cell, some coordinating intelligence that was keeping those photon emissions synchronized. Pop went further. He found that the biophoton field of a living organism was not just a byproduct of cellular metabolism. It appeared to function as a communications system. Cells were using light to coordinate with each other. The coherent biophoton field was carrying information across the organism in ways that chemical signaling alone could not account for. The speed of chemical signaling, the diffusion of molecules through cellular fluid, is too slow to explain the near instantaneous coordination that living systems routinely display. Something else was coordinating the organism, something that moved at the speed of light, the biophoton field, and then he found something that connects directly to the Vedic map. When he measured biophoton emission in states of health versus states of disease, he found that healthy organisms emitted coherent, organized biophoton fields. Diseased organisms emitted chaotic, disorganized fields. The coherence of the light field correlated with the coherence of the organism's function. Health was not just a chemical state, it was an optical state, a state of coherent light. The pranamaya kosha, the energy body, the layer the Vedic tradition described as carrying the patterns that precede physical health or illness. What Pop was measuring with his instruments was not identical to what the Vedic map described, but the structural correspondence is not something you can dismiss. Both describe a field that surrounds and interpenetrates the physical body, that carries organizing information, and that reflects the state of the organism's vitality in ways that precede and predict physical manifestation. There is something else Pop found that rarely gets mentioned in surface discussions of biophotons, and it is the detail that makes the connection to the aura most precise. The biophoton field does not stay inside the body, it extends beyond the skin. The coherent light that living cells emit passes through biological tissue and radiates outward into the space surrounding the organism. It is not contained by the physical boundary of the body. It is, in the most literal optical sense, a glow, a field of coherent light that surrounds the living form. And its coherence, its organization, its clarity as a signal reflects the state of the organism that is producing it. The traditions that describe the aura as a luminous field surrounding the body were not speaking in metaphor. They were describing, in the language available to them, something that Pop's instruments later confirmed. The body emits light. That light forms a field. That field carries information about the state of the organism. And the quality of that field, its coherence or its chaos, is both a reflection of the organism's condition and a factor in how the organism interacts with its environment. But there is a layer beneath even this, because biophoton emission and electromagnetic fields are still operating within the framework of classical physics. They are fields, yes. They extend beyond the body, yes. They carry information, yes. But they are still describable in terms of particles and waves and measurable quantities. They are the edge of the physical. What lies beneath the physical is where quantum mechanics enters this conversation, and where everything the surface world taught you about what you are gets quietly dismantled. At the quantum level, the level beneath molecules, beneath atoms, beneath subatomic particles, there is no solid matter. This is not a philosophical position. This is what quantum mechanics found when it went beneath the surface of what matter is made of. At the quantum scale, what you find is not stuff. What you find is probability, wave functions, fields of potential that exist in superposition, meaning in multiple possible states simultaneously, until the moment of observation collapses that superposition into a single actuality. The chair you are sitting in is not, at its deepest layer, a solid object. It is a vast collection of quantum fields, each one a probability distribution, each one existing in a state of superposition, that your observation is continuously collapsing into the experience of solidity. The solidity is real at the scale you are operating at. But beneath that scale, beneath the surface of what solid means, there is something that is not solid at all. There is something that is potential. There is something that is field. Now here is where this becomes directly relevant to your aura and to what is happening to it right now. The quantum physicist David Bohm spent much of his career developing what he called the implicate order. Bohm looked at the behavior of quantum systems and concluded that what we observe at the surface, what he called the explicate order, the world of separate objects and events unfolding in space and time, is a projection of something deeper. Beneath the explicate order, he proposed, is an implicate order, an enfolded wholeness in which everything is connected to everything else, in which what appears as separate at the surface is, at a deeper level, a single, undivided movement. Bohm used the image of a hologram. In a hologram, every part of the holographic plate contains information about the whole image. Cut the plate in half and each half still produces the whole image, just with less resolution. Bohm proposed that the universe operates holographically, that each part enfolds information about the whole, and that what we perceive as separate objects and separate people are local expressions of a single enfolded field. Your aura, in this framework, is not just the electromagnetic field your body emits. It is the local expression of your participation in the implicate order. It is the place where what is enfolded in you, your specific pattern of consciousness, your specific history of experience, your specific configuration of potential, meets the enfolded field of everything else. It is the interface between the individual and the whole. And there is a specific feature of Bohm's framework that the surface discussions of the implicate order tend to skip past, because it is the feature that is most difficult to hold in the thinking mind, without the thinking mind immediately trying to flatten it back into something more comfortable. Bohm did not say that the implicate order is a static background. He said it is an active, generative movement. He called it the hollow movement. Not a field that sits there passively while the explicate order plays out on top of it, but a dynamic, continuously unfolding process from which the explicate order is constantly being generated and into which it is constantly being re-enfolded. The separation between what is enfolded and what is unfolded is not a fixed boundary. It is a process, a continuous flowing of the implicate into the explicate and back. What this means for your aura is precise and important. Your field is not a fixed object that surrounds a fixed body. It is a local expression of a continuous process of unfolding from the implicate order. The patterns in your field, the emotional signatures in the Manomaya kosha, the organizing intelligence in the Pranamaya kosha, the knowing in the Vijnanamaya kosha, are not static properties that you carry around like luggage. They are continuously being generated from the deeper layer of the implicate order, shaped by the specific configuration of consciousness that you are, and continuously being re-enfolded back into that deeper layer. The field is a process, and because it is a process, it can change. Not by forcing the surface layers to be different, but by shifting the quality of what is being unfolded from the deeper layer. This is the layer beneath the surface claim that you can change your energy. You can, but not by managing the surface, by going beneath the surface to the layer from which the surface is being generated. And the traditions that mapped the aura understood this in their own language long before Bohm formalized it. In the Sufi tradition, the concept of the latifa describes subtle centers within the human energy field, centers that are understood as points of connection between the individual soul and the divine reality that underlies all of creation. The Sufi map of the human energy body is not identical to the Vedic map, but both describe the same structural truth, that the human being is not a closed system, that the field surrounding the physical body is the place where the individual participates in something larger than itself, and that the quality of that participation depends on the coherence and the activation of the field. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the concept of the Tselem, the divine image in which the human being is said to be made, was understood by many Kabbalistic commentators not as a metaphor, but as a literal description of the luminous body, the field of light that surrounds the physical form and constitutes the human being's connection to the divine source. The Zohar, the central text of Kabbalah, describes this luminous body in considerable detail, including its layers and its capacity to expand or contract, depending on the spiritual state of the individual. In the Taoist tradition, the concept of the Wei Qi, the defensive or protective energy field, describes the outermost layer of the body's energy system, the field that extends beyond the skin, and that mediates the body's relationship with its environment. Chinese medicine has worked with this field clinically for thousands of years, not as a belief system, but as a practical technology of health. The Wei Qi is not simply a protective barrier. It is described in the classical texts as the outermost expression of the body's total qi, the field that interfaces with the world, that first encounters environmental influences, and that reflects the overall vitality and coherence of the organism's internal state. A strong and coherent Wei Qi field means the organism is resilient, adaptive, and in clear communication with its environment. A depleted or fragmented Wei Qi field means the organism is vulnerable, reactive, and receiving distorted information from the field it is embedded in. 3 traditions, 3 continents, 3 different languages and cosmologies, all mapping the same territory, all describing a field that surrounds and interpenetrates the physical body, that has layers of increasing subtlety, that carries information, that connects the individual to something larger, and that has a quality that can change. That quality is what we need to talk about now, because this is where the activation becomes specific. Let me tell you about a woman named Sarah. Sarah was a physician. She had spent 15 years practicing internal medicine in a large urban hospital, and she was, by every surface measure, someone who had no use for anything she could not measure. She believed in evidence. She believed in mechanism. She believed in the kind of truth that you could put in a chart and defend in a peer-reviewed journal. She was not dismissive of her patients' inner lives, but she kept a careful boundary between the subjective experience of illness and the objective reality of what was happening in the body. Then one winter, Sarah began to notice something she could not chart. She had always been good at walking into a patient's room and knowing, before she had read a single result or asked a single question, whether the patient was going to be all right. She had attributed this to experience, to the accumulated pattern recognition of 15 years of practice, to the way a physician learns to read the subtle cues of posture and skin color, and the quality of breath that the untrained eye misses. But that winter, it became something else. She began to know things she had no sensory basis for knowing. She walked into the room of a patient who had been admitted for what appeared to be a straightforward respiratory infection, and felt something she could only describe as a wall of darkness. She ordered additional imaging that was not indicated by the presenting symptoms. The imaging revealed a mass that had not yet produced any symptoms beyond the infection. They caught it early enough to treat it successfully. She walked into another room and felt something she could only describe as light, a brightness in the space around the patient that made no sense given that the patient's chart was alarming. That patient recovered against all statistical probability. Sarah did not tell her colleagues about this. She was a physician. She had a reputation. She began, instead, to read. She found the heart math research. She found Pop's work on biophotons. She found the literature on what researchers were beginning to call biofield science. And she found the Vedic texts, which she read not as a believer but as a scientist reading a very old research paper written in a very different language. What she found in those texts was a description of exactly what she had been experiencing. The Manomaya kosha, the mental and emotional body, the layer of the field that carries the patterns of psychological and emotional reality, was described in the Vedic literature as perceptible to a sufficiently sensitized awareness, not through mystical gifting, through a specific quality of attention that the traditions called pratyahara, the withdrawal of awareness from the surface of sensory input, and the redirection of that awareness toward the subtler layers of what is present. Sarah had not been doing anything mystical. She had been, through 15 years of clinical practice, developing a quality of attention so refined that it had begun to perceive the subtler layers of what her patients were carrying in their fields. She had been reading auras, and she had been doing it with the same precision she brought to reading an EKG. What changed for Sarah was not what she could perceive. What changed was what she did with what she perceived. She stopped dismissing it. She stopped calling it intuition and filing it away as an interesting subjective experience. She began to treat it as data, and her clinical outcomes changed. But something else changed as well, something she had not anticipated and did not have a framework for until she went deeper into the Vedic literature. As she began to consciously attend to the fields of her patients, rather than unconsciously receiving them, her own field changed. The act of deliberate attention to the subtler layers of what was present, the act of reaching past the surface of the presenting symptoms and the chart data and the surface interaction to what was actually being broadcast in the field of the person in front of her. That act of attention was itself a practice. It was itself a form of the cultivation that the traditions described. And it was changing the coherence of her own field in ways she could feel, but initially could not name. She began to notice that patients responded to her differently, not to anything she said or did differently at the surface level, to something in her presence, something in the quality of the space she occupied when she walked into a room. Patients who were agitated became calmer. Patients who were withdrawn became more communicative, not because she was doing anything differently, because the field she was broadcasting had changed, because the deliberate cultivation of subtle perception had increased the coherence of her own electromagnetic and biophotonic field. And that increased coherence was being read by the nervous systems of the people she was in proximity with, beneath the threshold of anyone's conscious awareness, in the space between bodies that the surface world calls empty. Sarah had not set out to heal with her presence. She had set out to understand what she was perceiving, but the understanding itself was the transformation. The layer she had reached by following the question was the layer that changed everything above it. And you have been having your version of Sarah's experience. You have been receiving information from the fields of the people around you, and from the field of the space you are in, and from the composite field of the situations you encounter, and you have been filing most of it away as mood, as intuition, as the mysterious workings of your subconscious. The field has been active. The reception has been happening. What has been missing is the understanding of what you are actually receiving, and why, right now, the signal is getting stronger. There is a moment many people have had where something they always sensed beneath the surface of their reality suddenly became undeniable, a pattern they could finally see, a truth that had been hiding in plain sight. What was that moment for you? Leave it in the comments. The field benefits from that kind of honesty being spoken aloud, because it is getting stronger. And this is where we need to go beneath the surface of what activation means. The word activation, in the way it is most commonly used in conversations about the aura, tends to mean something vague. An awakening, a turning on of something that was off, an energetic upgrade. These are surface descriptions of something that has a much more specific mechanism beneath them. Your aura does not activate the way a light switch turns on. It activates the way a radio receiver comes into resonance with a signal that was always being broadcast. Here is the distinction, and it matters enormously. A light switch model of activation implies that before activation, nothing was happening, that you were energetically inert and something external came along and turned you on. This model keeps you passive. It makes activation something that happens to you, something you receive from outside, something you wait for. A resonance model of activation implies something entirely different. It implies that the signal has always been there, that the field has always been broadcasting, that what changes during activation is not the signal, but the receiver. Your aura does not become something it wasn't. It becomes more coherent, more organized, more capable of receiving and transmitting the information that the field has always contained. This is not a semantic difference. It is the difference between a model of reality in which you are a passive recipient of energetic events and a model in which you are an active participant in a field that is constantly available to you. The quantum mechanics beneath this distinction are precise. In quantum field theory, the vacuum, what we think of as empty space, is not empty. It is a seething field of quantum fluctuations, virtual particles constantly appearing and disappearing, a background field of energy that permeates all of space. This field is called the quantum vacuum, or sometimes the zero-point field, because it retains energy even at absolute zero temperature, even when all thermal energy has been removed. The field does not go to zero. It cannot. The zero-point energy is a fundamental feature of the quantum vacuum, not an anomaly. The physicist Hal Puthoff, building on earlier theoretical work, proposed that the zero-point field is not just a feature of empty space, but is the medium through which all matter and energy interact. He proposed that what we experience as inertia, the resistance of matter to acceleration, is actually the result of matter interacting with the zero-point field. That what we experience as gravity may be a manifestation of asymmetries in the zero-point field. That the zero-point field is not the background against which physical events occur, but is the substrate from which physical events emerge. If Puthoff's framework is correct, then the quantum vacuum is not empty space. It is the implicate order that Bohm described. It is the field from which everything emerges and into which everything is enfolded. And your aura, the electromagnetic and biophotonic and subtler field that surrounds your body, is your body's local interface with that field. Activation in this framework means increasing the coherence of your local field to the point where it can more fully participate in the information that the zero-point field contains. It means tuning the receiver. It means organizing the signal that your body is both emitting and receiving so that the noise decreases and the signal clarity increases. This is what the traditions were describing when they talked about the expansion of the aura. They were not describing something getting bigger in a simple spatial sense. They were describing an increase in coherence, in organizational complexity, in the capacity of the field to hold and transmit information without distortion. And this is what is happening right now. Not as metaphor, as mechanism. There is a specific layer of your aura that is the site of what is currently activating. Not the outermost electromagnetic layer, though that layer is affected. not the innermost layer, though that layer is the source. The layer that is activating is the one the Vedic tradition called the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the wisdom body, the layer of discrimination, intuition, and deeper knowing. This layer sits between the mental emotional body and the bliss body. It is the layer that the traditions consistently described as the seat of what we might call higher intelligence, not intelligence in the sense of accumulated information, but intelligence in the sense of direct knowing, gnosis in the Greek tradition, prajna in the Buddhist tradition, dat in the Kabbalistic tradition. All of these terms point to the same layer of the field, the layer where knowing does not come through reasoning from data, but through direct perception of what is. The Kabbalistic tradition is worth pausing on here, because the description of Da'at in the Zohar is unusually precise about what this layer of knowing actually is and how it differs from the layers above and below it. Da'at is not one of the 10 Sephirot, the 10 divine attributes described in the standard Kabbalistic diagram. It is described as a hidden Sephirah, a concealed point that sits between Chokmah, wisdom, and Binah, understanding, and that mediates between them. It is the point of direct contact, the moment when the knowing that exists in potential in Chokmah makes contact with the comprehending faculty of Binah and produces actual understanding. Without Da'at, wisdom and understanding remain separate. With Da'at, they become one movement. What the Zohar is describing in this precise technical language is the same thing the Vedic tradition called the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the layer of the field where direct knowing and the capacity to comprehend that knowing make contact, the layer where the signal from the deeper layers is translated into something that the mental body can actually receive and work with. It is the interface layer, the translation membrane, and when it is not active, when the Da'at layer is closed or the Vijnanamaya Kosha is dormant, wisdom and understanding remain separated. You may have access to information, and you may have the capacity to reason, but the direct knowing that would integrate them into genuine insight is missing. You think, but you do not know. You process, but you do not perceive. This layer has always been present in your field, but for most people, in most periods of ordinary life, it operates at a low level of activation. The mental emotional body, the Manomaya Kosha, is louder. The noise of thought, of emotional reactivity, of the constant processing of surface-level experience tends to drown out the subtler signal of the wisdom body. You have had moments of contact with it. Those moments of sudden clarity when you knew something without knowing how you knew it. Those moments of inexplicable certainty that turned out to be correct. Those moments when the right answer arrived before you had consciously formulated the question. Those were moments when the Vijnanamaya Kosha broke through the noise of the mental body and delivered its signal directly. What is happening now is that the threshold is shifting. The signal-to-noise ratio is changing. The wisdom body is becoming louder, not because it was quiet before, but because something in the field conditions of this period is supporting a higher degree of its activation. Let us be specific about what that something is. The Earth itself has an electromagnetic field. This is not a spiritual claim. it is measured by instruments. The Earth's magnetic field extends from the planet's interior out into space, creating the magnetosphere that protects the planet from solar radiation. Within the atmosphere, there is a specific electromagnetic resonance called the Schumann resonance, first predicted by physicist Winfried Otto Schumann in 1952 and subsequently measured. The Schumann resonance is a set of electromagnetic frequencies that exist in the space between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, excited primarily by lightning activity. The fundamental frequency of the Schumann resonance is approximately 7.83 Hz. This frequency is not arbitrary. It falls within the range of human brainwave frequencies associated with theta states, the states of deep relaxation, meditation, and hypnagogic consciousness that sit at the boundary between waking and sleep. It also overlaps with the alpha-theta border, a brainwave state associated with increased creativity, intuitive insight, and what researchers call the hypnagogic state, the state in which the boundary between conscious and unconscious processing becomes most permeable. Your brain, when it is in a theta or low alpha state, is oscillating at approximately the same frequency as the Earth's electromagnetic field. This is not coincidence. Research by the HeartMath Institute has found measurable correlations between fluctuations in the Schumann resonance and changes in human nervous system activity, cognitive performance, and cardiovascular function. The Earth's field and the human field are in constant interaction, and the quality of that interaction depends on the coherence of both. What this means at the level of the Vijnanamaya kosha is specific. The theta and low alpha brainwave states are precisely the states in which the wisdom body becomes most accessible. They are the states in which the noise of the Manomaya kosha, the constant chatter of the thinking mind, and the reactivity of the emotional body quiets enough for the subtler signal of the wisdom body to be perceived. And those states are entrained, at least in part, by the frequency of the Earth's electromagnetic field. When the Schumann resonance is at its fundamental frequency of 7.83 Hz, it is broadcasting at the frequency that supports the brainwave states in which the Vijnanamaya kosha is most active. What researchers have documented over recent decades is that the Schumann resonance is not static. Its amplitude, the strength of the signal, varies. And in recent years, those variations have been notable. There have been periods of significant amplitude increase, periods during which the Earth's electromagnetic field has been broadcasting at higher intensity than the historical baseline. When the amplitude increases, the entrainment effect on the human nervous system increases with it. The Earth's field becomes a stronger signal, and the human field, which is embedded in and interacting with the Earth's field continuously, responds. The traditions that mapped the human energy field also mapped the Earth's energy field. The concept of the Earth as a living being with its own field, its own intelligence, its own energetic cycles, is not unique to any one tradition. It is present in the indigenous traditions of every inhabited continent. The Andean concept of Pachamama, the Lakota concept of Mitakuye Oyasin, the Taoist concept of the earth as a body through which qi flows in patterns called dragon lines, the Celtic concept of the land as a living entity with sacred sites at its nodes of power. All of these are surface expressions of the same underlying map. The earth has a field, that field has cycles, and those cycles affect the human field. We are in a period of one of those cycles, a period in which the Earth's electromagnetic environment is changing in ways that are creating conditions for increased activation of the human field's subtler layers. This is not something you have to believe. It is something you can feel if you know what you are feeling for. And this brings us to the practice, because understanding the layer is only the beginning. The practice is how you meet the activation that is already underway. I want you to do something right now, not later, now. Find the place in your body where you feel most settled. For most people, this is the center of the chest, in the region of the heart. Not the anatomical heart, though the heart is there, but the center of the chest, the place that responds to beauty and to grief and to love, with a sensation that is unmistakably physical. Place your attention there, not your hand, your attention. The quality of awareness that can be directed. Now, without changing your breath, without forcing anything, simply notice the boundary of your body, the place where your skin meets the air. Notice that boundary as a line, as an edge, as the outermost surface of the physical you. And now, very gently, let your attention move beyond that boundary. Not far, just a few inches, into the space that surrounds your body, the space that is not your body but is also not empty, the space where the electromagnetic field of your heart is already present, already active, already broadcasting. Let your attention rest there, in the space just beyond your skin, in the field that is you but extends beyond the form you think of as you. You may feel warmth there. You may feel a subtle pressure, a slight density in the space around you. You may feel a tingling at the boundary. You may feel nothing at all with the surface of your awareness, but something in you knows that the field is there, the way you know a sound is present, even when you are not consciously listening for it. Now, from that place of attention, resting in the field just beyond your body, let your awareness move outward again, to the next layer, the layer that the Vedic map called the Pranamaya Kosha, the energy body, the layer that is subtler than the electromagnetic, but carries the patterns of your vitality, your life force, the organizing intelligence that keeps your biological systems coherent and functioning. This layer extends further than the electromagnetic layer, perhaps a foot, perhaps 2 feet, perhaps more, depending on your current state of vitality and coherence. Let your attention rest there, in the field that is you extended, in the layer that carries the information of your aliveness. And now, from there, reach further, to the layer that carries the patterns of your mind and your emotional life, the layer where your recurring thoughts and your emotional signatures are encoded in the field you are broadcasting. This layer extends further still, and it is the layer that most people are reading when they walk into a room and feel something. They are reading the Manomaya kosha of the people in that room. They are reading the emotional and mental field that those people are broadcasting. Notice what is in your Manomaya kosha right now, not by thinking about your emotions, by feeling what the field around you is carrying. What is the quality of what you are broadcasting? What emotional signature is encoded in the field that the person standing next to you would be reading right now, beneath the threshold of their conscious awareness? There is something important to understand about this layer that the surface discussions of emotional energy tend to miss. The Manomaya kosha does not just carry your current emotional state. It carries the accumulated pattern of your emotional history, the recurring emotional signatures that you have run so many times that they have become structural features of your field rather than passing states. The grief that never fully resolved, the anxiety that became a baseline, the anger that hardened into a fixed posture, the love that was never fully expressed and sits in the field as a kind of ache. These are not just feelings you have. They are patterns encoded in the electromagnetic and biophotonic structure of your field, patterns that you are broadcasting continuously, patterns that every nervous system in your vicinity is receiving and processing beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. This is the layer that most energy work, most emotional processing, most therapeutic practice is attempting to reach. And it is the layer that most of those practices can genuinely affect, because it is the layer that is most responsive to conscious attention. When you bring the quality of awareness that notices rather than reacts, the quality that can feel an emotional pattern in the field without immediately being consumed by it, the Manomaya kosha begins to reorganize. The patterns do not disappear, but their grip on the field loosens. The signal becomes less dominated by the accumulated weight of unprocessed emotional history and more capable of carrying what is actually present in this moment. This is what the practice of moving attention through the layers actually accomplishes at the level of the Manomaya kosha. Not the removal of emotional content, but the reduction of the distortion that unexamined emotional patterns create in the field. The signal gets cleaner. The broadcast becomes more accurate. What you are actually transmitting begins to more closely reflect what you actually are, rather than what your emotional history has been layering over what you actually are. And now, gently, reach for the next layer, the one that is harder to find. The Vijnanamaya kosha, the wisdom body, the layer that does not carry thought or emotion but carries knowing. This layer is quieter than the others. It does not announce itself. It does not broadcast loudly. It waits for your attention to become still enough to perceive it. You may find it as a quality of stillness, as a sense of depth beneath the activity of the other layers, as a very faint but unmistakable sense of knowing, of something that is simply clear in a way that the thinking mind is not clear. It is there, it has always been there, and right now, in this period of activation, it is more accessible than it has been. Let your attention rest there, in the deepest layer of your field that you can currently perceive, in the wisdom body, in the part of your aura that is currently activating. Stay there for a moment. Let the knowing that lives in that layer be present without translating it immediately into thought. Just let it be there. Let it be felt. Let it be real in the way that a sound is real before you identify what is making it. This is the practice, not a one-time exercise, a daily orientation, the daily act of moving your attention through the layers of your own field, from the surface to the depth, and letting the wisdom body be present to your awareness. This is what the traditions called the cultivation of the subtle body, and it is what the activation that is currently underway is asking of you. Because the activation is not automatic in the sense of passive, it is automatic in the sense of inevitable. The conditions are present, the signal is available, but what you do with your attention determines how fully you participate in what is being made available. Now let us go to the deepest layer that this transmission can reach. Because there is something beneath the Vijnanamaya kosha, beneath the wisdom body, that the activation is ultimately pointing toward. And it is the most important thing in this entire transmission. The Vedic map calls it the Anandamaya kosha, the bliss body. And the name is misleading if you take it at the surface level, because bliss in the Vedic sense does not mean happiness. It does not mean pleasure. It does not mean the feeling you get when something good happens. The Sanskrit word ananda points to something that has no precise English equivalent. It points to the quality of consciousness itself, when it is not filtered through the layers of personality and conditioning and the accumulated weight of experience. It points to what is left when all the other layers are seen through, not removed, seen through. The Anandamaya kosha is the layer of your field that is closest to pure consciousness, the layer that is most fundamental, the layer that the other layers rest upon. And it is, paradoxically, the layer that is most difficult to perceive from the surface, because the surface layers are so much louder. But here is what the traditions consistently reported about this layer, and here is what makes it the most important layer in the context of what is currently activating. The Anandamaya kosha does not belong entirely to you. This is the layer at which the individual field and the universal field are not fully separate. This is the layer that Bohm's implicate order maps onto. This is the layer at which the holographic principle operates, where your local field contains information about the whole, and the whole contains information about you. The activation of the Vijnanamaya kosha, the wisdom body, is significant. But it is significant precisely because the wisdom body is the layer that can perceive the Anandamaya kosha. The wisdom body is the instrument through which the deepest layer becomes accessible to awareness. And the deepest layer, when it becomes accessible, changes not just what you know, but what you are. This is not a claim about spiritual advancement. It is a claim about the structure of the field. When the wisdom body activates sufficiently, it begins to perceive the layer beneath it. And what it perceives in that layer is the ground of your being, the field that is prior to all the patterns and all the history and all the conditioning that the other layers carry. It perceives what you are before you are anything in particular. And that perception, that direct contact with the ground of your own being, is what the traditions consistently described as the most transformative experience available to a human being. Not because it gives you something you didn't have, because it shows you what you have always been. Let me tell you about a man named Davin. Davin was a teacher. He taught mathematics at a secondary school in a city that is not important to name, in a country that is not important to name, because what happened to him happens everywhere and has always happened everywhere. He was, by his own description, a person who lived almost entirely in his head. He was comfortable with abstraction. He was comfortable with logic. He was deeply uncomfortable with anything that could not be formalized, structured, proven. For most of his adult life, Davin had experienced what he called the gap, a persistent sense that there was something just out of reach, not something he could name or describe, not something he could find by thinking harder, just a sense that the life he was living, the thoughts he was thinking, the emotions he was feeling, were all happening on the surface of something much larger that he had never quite made contact with. He had tried to close the gap with achievement, with intellectual mastery, with the satisfaction of solving difficult problems. The gap remained. He had tried to close it with relationships, with travel, with the accumulated experiences of a full and busy life. The gap remained, not because his life was empty, because the gap was not in his life. The gap was in his perception of himself. He was perceiving the surface layers of his own field and mistaking them for the whole of what he was. Then, one winter evening, Davin sat down to grade papers, and something happened that he could not explain and never tried to explain to anyone for many years afterward. He was sitting at his desk, and the noise in his mind, which was usually constant and loud, simply stopped. Not because he did anything, not because he was meditating or practicing anything, it simply stopped. And in the silence that followed, he became aware of something that had been there all along, but that the noise had been covering. A quality of presence, a depth beneath the surface of his own awareness, a stillness that was not empty, but was paradoxically more full of something than anything he had ever experienced. He stayed in that stillness for what he thought was a few minutes, but turned out to be nearly 2 hours. And when the noise returned, as it did, gradually, like a tide coming back in, something had permanently changed. Not in his circumstances, not in his thoughts, in his relationship to the gap. The gap was still there, but he now knew what was in it. He had touched the Anandamaya kosha. He had made contact with the ground of his own being. And that contact, even though it was brief, even though the surface noise returned, left a residue that never fully went away. And knowing that the depth was there, and knowing that what he had always sensed was just out of reach was not out of reach at all. It was the most intimate thing about him. It had been hidden not by distance but by the noise of the layers above it. In the years that followed, Davin began to notice something that surprised him more than the original experience had. The gap, which had driven him toward achievement and accumulation for most of his adult life, no longer functioned as a driver. Not because he became passive or indifferent, but because the gap had been filled, not with something new, but with the recognition of what had always been there. And without the gap driving him, his relationship to his work changed completely. He had always been a competent teacher. He became, in the years after that winter evening, something his students could not quite name, but consistently described in similar terms: a presence. Someone in whose classroom thinking happened differently. Someone who, without doing anything obviously different, created a quality of space in which understanding arrived more easily, in which confusion resolved more quickly, in which students who had struggled with abstraction their whole lives suddenly found themselves able to hold it. Darwin had not changed his teaching method, his field had changed. The coherence of the Anandamaya kosha, once contacted and recognized, had begun to filter upward through the layers. The Manomaya kosha became quieter. The Vijnanamaya kosha became more consistently active, and the quality of what he was broadcasting into the space of his classroom changed in ways that the nervous systems of his students were reading and responding to, beneath the threshold of anyone's conscious awareness, in the electromagnetic and biophotonic exchange that happens in every shared space between people who are present to each other. He had not set out to become a healing presence. He had simply made contact with the ground of his own being, and the ground, once contacted, changed everything above it. And you have had your version of Darwin's moment, perhaps more than one, those moments of inexplicable stillness, those moments when the noise paused and something else was briefly present. Those moments that you may have dismissed as strange or unexplainable, or simply filed away as a curious experience you couldn't categorize. Those were moments when your awareness briefly touched the Anandamaya kosha, when the wisdom body, for a moment, was active enough to perceive the layer beneath it, when the veil between the surface layers and the deepest layer became thin enough to see through. What is happening now, in this period of activation, is that the conditions that support those moments are becoming more prevalent. The thinning of the veil between the Vijnanamaya kosha and the Anandamaya kosha is not a permanent achievement that you reach once and maintain forever. It is a fluctuating quality that depends on the coherence of your field, the quality of your attention, and the electromagnetic conditions of the environment you are embedded in. And right now, the electromagnetic conditions are supporting a higher degree of that coherence than has been typical. This is why more people are having spontaneous experiences of what Darwin experienced. This is why the reports of sudden moments of inexplicable clarity, of deep stillness, of contact with something beneath the surface of ordinary consciousness are increasing. This is not mass delusion. This is a field effect. The conditions are changing. The receiver is being upgraded by the signal itself. Has there been a moment recently when you sensed something beneath the surface of your ordinary reality and couldn't look away from it? A truth that had been hidden in plain sight, or a pattern that dissolved the moment you looked directly at it? Tell us in the comments what you found when you looked deeper. These reflections matter more than you know. But here is the layer beneath even that, and this is the final layer this transmission reaches. The activation of your aura is not something that is happening to you in isolation. Your field is not an island, it is a node in a network, and the network is activating. The HeartMath Institute's Global Coherence Initiative has been monitoring the Earth's electromagnetic field and correlating those measurements with measures of human coherence for years. What they have found is that when large numbers of people are in a state of heart coherence simultaneously, the electromagnetic field of the Earth shows measurable changes. And conversely, When the Earth's field shows increased coherence, measures of human coherence tend to increase as well. The relationship is bidirectional. The individual field and the planetary field are in constant mutual influence. This is the scientific description of something the traditions have always known. The concept of morphic resonance, developed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake, proposes that the behaviors and patterns of organisms are influenced by the cumulative field generated by all previous organisms of the same kind. That there is a field of habit, of accumulated pattern, of collective memory that all members of a species both contribute to and draw from. That learning something new is not just a change in an individual nervous system, but a contribution to a field that makes it slightly easier for every other member of the species to learn the same thing. If Sheldrake's framework is correct, then every person who activates the Vijnanamaya kosha, every person who makes contact with the Anandamaya kosha, every person who increases the coherence of their individual field is contributing to a morphic field that makes it slightly easier for every other person to do the same. The activation is not just individual, it is collective, and the collective activation creates the conditions for further individual activation in a recursive loop that builds on itself. This is the hidden layer beneath the activation of your aura. It is not just your aura that is activating, it is the aura of the collective, the field that all human beings participate in together, and your individual activation is both a result of that collective shift and a contribution to it. You are not a passive recipient of an energetic event. You are a node in a network that is reorganizing itself. And the quality of your participation in that reorganization, the coherence of your field, the depth of your attention, the degree to which you are willing to move through the surface layers to the wisdom body and beyond, determines not just your own experience, but the quality of the signal that you contribute to the field that everyone else is drawing from. This is the weight of what activation actually means, not just for you, for the field you are embedded in. The ancient traditions understood this weight. The Bodhisattva vow in the Buddhist tradition is the vow to remain in relationship with the world, to use whatever clarity and depth you have cultivated, not for your own liberation alone, but for the liberation of all beings. This is not a moral injunction, it is a recognition of the structure of the field. The individual and the collective are not separate. What you cultivate in your field contributes to the field that everyone else is drawing from. The vow simply makes this structural reality conscious and intentional. The Sufi concept of the Qutb, the pole, describes a human being whose field has achieved such a degree of coherence and activation that they function as a stabilizing node for the collective field, a point around which the larger field organizes itself. This is not a claim about spiritual superiority. It is a description of a field function. A highly coherent node in a network stabilizes the network around it. This is physics, and it is the physics of what the traditions were pointing to when they described the most activated human beings as sources of blessing, as healing presences, as people in whose company things simply went better. Your activation matters, not in an abstract feel-good sense, in a specific mechanistic sense. Your field is in constant interaction with the fields of everyone around you. The coherence of your field, the degree to which your wisdom body is active and your emotional body is organized rather than chaotic. The degree to which you are a clear signal rather than a noisy one affects every person you come into proximity with, beneath the threshold of anyone's conscious awareness, through the electromagnetic and biophotonic and subtler interactions that the surface world has not yet learned to name, but the body has never stopped performing. You have been doing this all along. The question is whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, whether you are a deliberate participant in the field or an accidental one, whether the signal you contribute to the collective is organized or chaotic, coherent or noisy, aligned with the depth of what you are, or filtered through the noise of the surface layers. The activation that is underway is an invitation to become deliberate, to bring the quality of your attention to the layers of your own field with the same seriousness and precision that Sarah brought to her clinical observations. To practice the movement of awareness from the surface to the depth with the same consistency that Devan, after his moment of contact, began to bring to the daily cultivation of stillness. To understand that the field you are broadcasting is not a private matter. It is a contribution to a shared reality that everyone you encounter is drawing from. And to understand that the layer beneath all of this, the Anandamaya Kosha, the ground of your being, the layer that is closest to pure consciousness and furthest from the noise of the surface, is not something you have to earn or develop or deserve. It is what you are. The other layers are what you are doing. The deepest layer is what you are. And the activation that is underway is simply the process of the doing, becoming transparent enough that the being can be seen. This is what the traditions meant when they spoke of the luminous body. Not a body made of light in the sense of photons, though biophoton emission is real and measurable. A body that is, at its deepest layer, luminous in the sense of clear, transparent to itself, no longer opaque with the accumulated density of unexamined assumption and unprocessed experience, and the collective agreement about what is real and what is possible. The veil between you and this clarity is not thick. It has never been thick. It is made of the same material as thought. It exists because attention sustains it, and it dissolves when attention moves through it. Every time you move your awareness from the surface layer to the next layer, and from that layer to the next, you are dissolving a portion of the veil, not permanently, not all at once, but incrementally, the way fog dissolves in the morning as the light increases. The light is always there, the fog is always temporary. The question is only how long you remain in the fog before you remember that the light is what you actually are. What has been revealed in this transmission cannot be re-hidden by returning to the surface. You now know that the field surrounding your body is not a spiritual metaphor. You know that it has measurable layers, that those layers carry specific categories of information, that they have been mapped with precision by traditions separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. You know that the wisdom body, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, is the layer that is currently activating, and that its activation is supported by measurable changes in the electromagnetic environment you are embedded in. You know that the deepest layer, the Anandamaya Kosha, is not a destination you are moving toward, but the ground you are already standing on, obscured by the noise of the layers above it. And you know that your individual activation is a contribution to a collective field that is reorganizing itself in this period, and that your deliberate participation in that reorganization matters in ways that extend far beyond your personal experience. The practice is simple and it is lifelong. Move your attention daily from the surface to the depth, from the physical boundary of your skin to the electromagnetic field just beyond it, from that field to the energy body, from the energy body to the mental and emotional body, from there to the wisdom body, and from the wisdom body, reach for the ground beneath it, the stillness, the clarity, the layer that is not doing anything because it is the substrate from which all doing emerges. You do not have to stay there. You cannot stay there, not at first, not while the surface layers are still active and loud. But the reaching matters. The daily act of reaching from the surface toward the depth is itself the cultivation. It is itself the activation. It is itself the practice that the traditions spent thousands of years developing, and that the science is now beginning to understand. Your aura is not a decoration. It is not a spiritual aspiration. It is the field through which you participate in reality. And that field is, right now, in this precise period of time, more available to your conscious awareness than it has been in a very long time. The question is not whether you are ready. You are here. That is the answer to that question. The question is what you do with what you now know, how you carry this understanding into the ordinary moments of your day, how you bring the quality of attention that reaches for the wisdom body into the moments when the surface world is loud and demanding and insisting that the surface is all there is, how you hold the knowledge of the deepest layer while navigating the surface, how you let the activation that is underway in your field be met with the conscious participation of a person who knows what field they are in and what it is capable of. This is what it means to live from the depth rather than the surface. Not to abandon the surface. The surface is where life happens, where you eat and work and love and grieve and navigate the 1,000 ordinary challenges of being a human being in a world that mostly agrees the surface is all there is. But to know, while you are on the surface, that the depth is there, to feel the ground beneath the surface, even when you cannot see it, to carry the wisdom body's knowing into the mental body's activity, to let the Anandamaya Kosha's clarity filter upward through the layers and change the quality of everything that happens in the layers above it. This is the integration, not a dramatic transformation, not a sudden and permanent shift into a higher state, a daily, incremental, often subtle deepening of your relationship with the layers of your own field, a growing capacity to perceive what has always been there, a growing coherence in the signal you are broadcasting, a growing contribution to the collective field that is, right now, in the process of reorganizing itself around a higher degree of coherence and clarity. You are not watching this happen from the outside. You are a node in the network that is reorganizing. Your activation is part of the activation. Your coherence is part of the collective coherence. Your willingness to move from the surface to the depth is a contribution to the morphic field that makes it easier for every other person to do the same. The veil is thinner than you think. It has always been thinner than you think. And now, you know what is on the other side of it. Not because someone told you to believe it, because you reached for it, because you moved your attention through the layers and felt the ground beneath them, because the wisdom body, which has always been there, was met by your awareness, perhaps for the first time with full intention, and it delivered what it has always been holding for you. That is not something that can be taken back. What has been seen cannot be unseen. What has been felt cannot be made unfelt. The layer you have touched in this transmission is now part of your map, and the map, once drawn, changes the territory you move through. If there is someone in your life who has been sensing something beneath the surface of their reality, but has not yet had the language to reach it, return to this transmission in a moment of stillness, when the surface noise is lowest and the deeper layers are most accessible, or share it with them. That act of sharing does not simply pass information along. It gives someone access to a layer they sensed, but could not reach alone. It creates a shared depth between two fields, and two fields in contact with the same layer reinforce each other in ways that neither could sustain in isolation. What layer did you reach today? What was there when the noise of the surface layers quieted enough for you to feel it? Drop one word in the comments that describes what you found in the depth. One word. Let it be specific. Let it be true. Let it come from the wisdom body, not the thinking mind. And if someone in your life is ready to see beneath the surface of what they think they are, share this with them. Not because sharing is a good thing to do, because every person whose field becomes more coherent makes the field that everyone else is embedded in slightly more coherent. That is the physics. That is the practice. That is the activation. You are no longer looking at the surface of your own field and calling it the whole truth. You see the depth now, and the depth, as you have felt, is not empty. It is not frightening. It is the most familiar thing about you. It is what you have always been. Beneath everything you have been told you are, beneath everything you have accumulated and performed and defended and believed, beneath all of it, welcome to what was always there.